Who would want to be an architecture student? Someone who hates themselves. No, I'm joking. What is the dress code for an architect? Black. If you are wearing anything with color, you are ostracized. Sure, what do they do? I don't even know. Google. I Google everything. I love the name Google too, like Google, woo. I don't know. God, I had way too much coffee today. I'm so sorry. Okay, so today I thought I would answer questions from Google about architecture, relating to architecture. So we'll get right into it. Hey guys, it is your girl Nat here, and today I am answering Google questions. Yay, let's get on it. I always wanted to do a video like this, but I never had the time. So the first question is architecture. What do they do? I don't even know. Are you referring to architects or architecture itself? So architecture refers to buildings, the actual design of a building. And I guess another good question to ask here is, are all buildings architecture? And is all architecture buildings? Does that make sense? It's a good question. And yeah, so I have a video on what actually is architecture here, and I just don't want to regurgitate everything I'm saying. But architects, they're in charge of designing, presenting, and crafting all of the construction documents, which are basically instructions as to how to build a building. Fantastic, so great, right? We're literally building our environment, which is pretty cool. House that you grew up in. Architecture, man, right? But most cookie cutter homes though, that was really pushed forward by real estate in that field. So architecture, what you need to know. I feel like everything. My brain hurts all the time. Understanding construction materials, construction methods, structural properties, good form. You need to understand art, which I know is kind of super weird that nobody really thinks about. What works in art and what doesn't, what forms an artwork and what doesn't, can really influence an architectural project. I always think of Zaha Hadid's work. She started out doing a lot of art projects before she really got in dirty with the architectural design process. Really good to understand forms in art and what actually looks visually appealing. Architecture, what makes it unique? I've mentioned this a couple of times. I personally think the Starchitects kind of ruin landscapes. If you analyze a lot of Asian cultures and towns, they actually have a feng shui master, and they make sure that whatever building is going to be newly built in a town or cityscape matches the aesthetics of the existing city. I think human beings in general, we kind of like uniformity. Each building has their own kind of innate personality, which is great. But I look at skylines in New York and Seattle, and I just see so many different aesthetics of architecture that were explored by Starchitects or wannabe Starchitects. And I think the lack of uniformity can be really overwhelming, and it's very oversaturated right now. That's just my personal take on it, but let me know what you guys think. You know, I'm in this constant debate, and I think right now, me as a student, I'm having a identity crisis with architecture because I have shared several opinions about architecture and modernism, and I think in a way school encourages architects to think in a certain way without actually taking into consideration what the general population thinks about architecture. Architects and architecture school can do a much better job actually listening to the occupants of these buildings and better serve our built environment, because that ultimately is the goal of good architecture. So I don't necessarily know if Starchitects ruins skylines, and I'm sorry to be so wishy-washy on this, and this is such a highly debatable subject, so let me know what you guys think. Honestly, I think right now I've been thinking so much about this topic because there have been so many good points brought up in the comment section, and now I'm rambling, so I'm just gonna end it. I'm so sorry. Okay, bye. Architecture is pretty unique as you are building the futures of tomorrow, and that is the part of architecture that is actually really exciting. What is the dress code for an architect? Black. Black. All you wear is black clothes, maybe some white, some grays. If you are wearing anything with color, you are ostracized. Not really, but all day, every day, your whole wardrobe's black, and just embrace it and have fun with it. Can architecture be copyrighted? So copyright in general in architecture is kind of tricky, honestly. Archie Marathon did a great video on architecture and copyright, or I think it's like copy wrong, which is really great. And I would recommend watching that video actually, because Kevin and Andrew, they go over it in such a great video. Can architecture change the world? Architecture, actually, we kind of capitalize on understanding human behavior and designing it in such a way that you move in a certain way around buildings. Or in cities, same thing with urban planning. Urban planners do the same thing. We're trying to predict human movement through spaces and capitalizing on that. So yes, I think it can. And if you study history, like Cold War architecture, they wanted to introduce more light into spaces with like Lever House by, I think that was by SOM. You know, Crystal Palace, just trying completely change the course of architecture and the course of the world and architecture. So yeah, I do think architecture has the capacity to change the world. It happened slowly and it's met with a lot of resistance too. So Crystal Palace was shamed shamed by so many critics just because they hated the new aesthetic. But now if you look at our built environment now, you see Crystal Palace everywhere with the, you know, curtain walls and steel construction and glass facades. So, but any new aesthetic that comes around is always going to be met with great hesitation. But I think that is always true with anything that changes the world, right? Can architecture solve social problems? Going to my last point, just because urban designers and architects really capitalize and try to influence human behavior and movement as much as we can, absolutely. A question I asked in my anti-homeless architecture video is, who has the right to a city? A lot of social problems pertain to certain groups of people who have been suppressed. And I think if architecture really embraces and accepts differences among our human race, then yeah, absolutely. It's a really tricky question, and perhaps I'll make another video, like longer video on this, because I'm actually exploring this right now in studio at UPenn. Basically, we are designing a carnival and how carnivals are actually a expression of suppressed culture and just this explosion of expression that has been suppressed so long by certain societal structures and hierarchies that have been placed upon everyone, really, which leads to people being oppressed just because it is what it is, right? But architecture, I think, is slowly trying to push back on that and actually accommodate for these groups of people that have been suppressed for so long. Can architecture make you rich? Like studying architecture? Well, with student loans, no. Student loans in the States, at least, are just awful. They really are. I think America just wants to keep people in a perpetual state of debt. So, if you don't need to take out student loans, yeah, probably. And it depends on how far you want to go in architecture too. But if you're in it just for the money, it's probably not worth the time, just because you have to spend so much time and energy into architecture to become a licensed architect. And if you are doing it for the money, you could probably do better in business, probably. Staying out of debt is the key, kids. Can architecture promote environmental awareness? Absolutely, absolutely. So the construction world is about 1/8 of greenhouse gas emissions. It actually might be more than that. I learned that statistic a while ago, a couple years ago, so it's probably more than that. Architects in general need to do a much better job paying attention to environmental problems, just because construction takes such a big amount of environmental energy and exhaust. For instance, even when you are pouring concrete, actually creating the material concrete takes a lot. It's a lot of environmental stresses and a lot of emissions. Same thing with like harvesting wood and deforestation, a huge problem. And architecture in the world of building is not exempt from this. And we probably almost encourage it just because we are having a housing boom because of the booming population. Honestly, there's like too many people right now. Architecture, what degree? Not quite sure if that's like, what degree do you need to be an architect? Maybe in architecture, you need a professional degree or a master's degree to satisfy the requirement laid out by NCARB. You need to have a strong understanding of structural design and all that good stuff just to make sure none of the buildings fall over, which would be tragic. What laptop is best for an architecture student? So I have the Dell XPS laptop. I love Dell, and I get this request a lot to make a video about this, and I will. But the Dell XPS 15 laptop is one of my personal favorites. I'll I'll link it down below. And I also have a desktop, which I bought in the beginning of quarantine. Absolutely love my desktop. If you can get by using a desktop, probably preferred. Just because desktop on a monitor can definitely handle a lot heavier files, which you need for architecture. What is it like to be an architecture student? It's HE double hockey sticks, okay? You spend so much time and energy trying to do the perfect studio project only to be slammed by structures homework, construction drawing, blah blah blah, this and that, and I feel like in a way we don't really get that much of a break, which kind of sucks. It's a lot of work. You don't sleep a lot. We are in fact the most sleep deprived major, but if you are curious about what being an architecture student is actually like, I made a day in my life short on YouTube. It's a minute long, and I have a couple other videos on this channel where I explain what it's really like, and I don't really sugarcoat anything either. So if you're curious about that, go check it out. What does an architecture student need? Guys, watch my videos. I'm here to help out. I have another video on that. Who would want to be an architecture student? Someone who hates themselves. No, I'm joking. No, it's such a love-hate relationship. My one friend, she said it the most perfect way. Studying architecture in a way is like you're in an abusive relationship. It prevents you from seeing your friends. You're holed up in your architecture building at whatever school you attend. I just like lived in that building. You can't go outside, you can't see your friends, prevents you from eating, prevents you from sleeping, destroys your mental health. Not really. If it does, please seek some help. It's hard. It's a hard major. I hope that you can find some joy in it, because the minute you kind of shift your mindset and actually be like, wow, like I'm actually really doing something cool here and something creative and expressive, I think you'll find a lot of joy in the major. When does architecture become art? Super good question. We study art and architecture, and in a way it's almost interchangeable. So similar to Zaha Hadid always starting with an art project before even getting to an architecture project is super important, because I think in a way it's almost interchangeable. And the common trend right now is that architecture is in fact art. You know, when I look at my cookie cutter house, right, that my parents bought, is it art? Probably not, right? It was really designed by a real estate. It wasn't really designed by an architect. It doesn't really embrace experiences, and interior designers fix the mistakes of architects, lead to better functionality of a house. But this is another good video topic. Maybe I'll make another video if you guys are interested. So anyway, my name's Natalie. If you are new here, hey, hit the subscribe button, join our Discord, and I hope to see you guys in the next video. Love you guys.